Hey everybody, this is Dan Keldsen, Chief Innovation Officer with Infocap.ai. And this episode of Next Future Today includes my new best friend, Melvin Brown II. He's a former OPM CIO, 33 years of combined military and federal service, FinOps Foundation public sector leader, and now VP of Growth at CANI, which is Contracts Administration Network International. We ended up talking about, this is probably not a surprise if you've listened to other episodes, a lot of different topics. Given Melvin's experience in the government sector, hands-on within the government in CIO level roles, he has a very interesting perspective on sort of how do you get things done from executing within the government. How do you think about FinOps from a government perspective? How do you think of it from a vendor perspective, selling into the government, selling solutions, and how this is just one of many topics. How are there potentially wires crossed and how money is allocated and budgeted and allowed to be spent in government situations and in a 1-year time frame versus thinking longer term to where you can get advantages of reserved instances and other things that come about through cloud opportunities to radically reduce your costs, even though you're pre-purchasing in advance what may seem on the surface like a lot of computing power or however you might be thinking, or potential. That's one of many topics. Also, modernization. How do you fit in modernization with approaches to shifting from on-prem to the cloud? The dangers that you're likely to run into, which is probably not a surprise to anybody who's already gone through any sort of process of moving from old approaches to cloud. There's lots of ways to make it super expensive to do that. And part of our desire in this interview is to make sure that you don't do that and you head that off before it happens, because it's happened to a lot of us and not a lot of fun. So lots of tips that I think if you are within an agency right now, or you're in an organization that's trying to work with government agencies and find ways where you can both win, there's infinite material in this interview. And I have a feeling that we're going to be talking, Melvin and I, at some point in the near future about a whole bunch of other things, because we kind of just jumped on the tip of a couple of different topics that can go very, very deep. And I like the nuance that he brings to this, because it's based in reality of being a successful government CIO. So if any of that sounds really interesting to you, then, well, here we go. Melvin, it's so good to see you again. We talked a couple months ago, but welcome to Next Future Today. Thank you for making time.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So one of the things I think, I thank God for LinkedIn. So I stumbled onto a post that you had back, I think it was December, and you talked about the massive impact of modernizing procurement, which is not typically like the runaway viral story that gets posted on social media, right? So not a lot of people talking about procurement, and especially government procurement on sort of both sides. So, and you spent a lot of time in that world. So could you sum up what you're talking about in that, and kind of the thrust of how you came to the conclusion on how procurement should really be headed instead of where it's been kind of landlocked for a while?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think sort of there's a couple of things. One, just the way the government buys is, slightly problematic to the way the commercial sector buys.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that a lot, that the budget process doesn't always align up with the rules of contracting and your development activities. And so we can't get the same discounts because our money's only good for 1 year. And
Right.
so when you're dealing with 1 year money, you can't make long-term commitments. And so a lot of those long-term commitments lead to bigger discounts in pricing. I
Yeah.
mean, you can do what GSA is doing right now, where they're coming up with this one gov strategy and they're trying to drive down costs with negotiating better
Yep.
pricing. But I think there's more than one highway to get to DC, I guess is the best way to say that.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if you could somehow look at the IT budget as more of a multi-year budget and not not be just a single year, because I haven't had an IT project that was large that was just 1 year.
Right.
And so with that in mind, these projects run for multi-years, so why not allow the funding to run somewhere in parallel with what you believe to be the average length of an IT project?
Yep.
That way CIOs and the finance team aren't scrambling every year trying to come up with budget to meet out year requirements that they know are coming.
Right.
And then industry can better predict what their out year revenue is going to look like because they've got a commitment from the government, and they can offer you better pricing because it's a lower risk to them.
Yeah.
That's a model it's just to me a good business model. I just think it's a better business practice to do if you can do that.
Yep. Yeah. So, and that's, I mean, logically that makes sense. So, what's the hang up? I mean, there's I spent, just in full disclosure for me, so most of my career has been commercial side. I've done, some consulting and integration work and workshops and things like that for government agencies. Infocap, where I work, 90% of our business is federal government. So I feel the pain to a certain extent. I'm feeling it more these days because it's just the nature of reality. But what is it that's causing the issue that you're not allowed to look beyond a year, essentially?
Well, it's how money gets appropriated. So Congress appropriates money, and they appropriate money based on categories. And so you could have, salaries and expenses money. You can have ops funding. You can have R&D funding. So they come in various colors, if you will. And so based on the color of money and how Congress appropriates that money will determine the length of time that you have to spend and obligate that money.
Okay.
The great thing that the government did was identifying this IT Technology Modernization Fund, which allows you to get investment capital to do modernization. What we were able to do at OPM, which was also a part of the what we call the MGT Act, was we were able to establish what was considered to be a working capital fund internally.
Okay.
And so a certain percentage of the end of the year funds could be reprogrammed and put into this working capital fund, thus extending the life of the funding. So then it went from 1 year money to 3 year money. So now, as we're starting to modernize, we could use that money to fund longer term projects. And we got a source of revenue that we know is good for 3 years. The challenge with that, though, that money is only good for modernization and development. It is not for operations. And so that was kind of how the fund was established.
Okay.
And so when you're talking about your software and your software, just even your cloud instances, if I can buy a 3-year reserve instance where I'm going to reserve a certain amount of cloud capacity over the next 3 years operationally, the cloud vendors will give you a bigger discount.
Yeah, right.
and so combining that with driving down prices and longer term commitments, I think you get a more holistic approach to true cost savings or cost avoidance of not having to spend that money going forward. So it really does come down to how the appropriators appropriate the money and classify it when they give it to the agencies.
Okay. And is this unique to OPM, or is this did you kick off a wave of ways to think about this and execute?
Well, so 33 years, 33 and 7 months of federal service.
Yeah.
I started out in one of my first federal jobs was doing acquisition support.
Okay.
And I think one of the most valuable classes that I took in my career was appropriations law.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that class was foundational for me as a leader, because now the first question I ask whenever I take over an organization is, as we're going through the budget, I want to know, how is it appropriated?
Okay.
Because once I know how it was appropriated, then I can build my strategy.
Right. Yeah.
And so if it's revolving fund, and so I'll give you an example that revolving fund is another classification of funding, and this is where internal federal services providers receive monies from agencies, and so at OPM we had USA Jobs, USA Staffing, USA Learning. Those were all revolving fund projects because we had interagency agreements with other agencies to do work with them.
Okay.
Well, with revolving fund money, it's just like running a business. You're taking money from customers. That money can only be spent servicing and providing services in support of that customer.
Okay.
So as a CIO, you can't just peel that off and say, "Hey, I want to use that to fund modernization." No,
Right.
that's a revolving fund pot of money that you have to use in support of that customer.
Right. So I was going to say, this is a great direction, I think, that could help anybody who's listening. So for anybody who's in an agency who's listening to this and they have not fully embraced the kind of the approach that you had put together at OPM, what should they do in the next 12 to 18 months? Seems too long. So if we 3 to 6 months, is that too fast? I mean, like, if they were going to prep with tagging strategy and getting that foundation right, what's like a good amount of time that's not too little, not too much, because you could let it drag out, and then where are you?
I think you can do it in the first 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
If you got in a room within the first 30 to 45 days, I think you can get that done.
Okay. And who would be on that team? If like there's a core.
Your core team are going to be your engineers, your security people, because you want to tag for cyber to track your costs.
Mm-hmm.
Your architects, because they're going to be architects in the system. So you want to architect with cost in mind. So you want to make sure you're architecting a smart, cost-efficient system.
Mm-hmm.
And then your FinOps practitioner.
Okay.
And the four of them can get in a room, come up with a tagging strategy, and you're probably going to need your budget person because you need to make sure that it maps back to any fundamental chargeback accounts that you might need.
Okay.
And I would say those 5 people are enough to get started.
Oh, okay. That's refreshing to hear. So that's like is that a 1 pizza or a 2 pizza meeting? Or do we stay away from pizza because that's a signal of potential DoD activity?
I don't. That's probably a 2 pizza meeting.
Yeah, that's from a lot of whatever ops perspectives or startups. If it's more people that can then would be satisfied with 2 pizzas, there's too many people in that meeting. is one of the concepts.
Yeah, I just you got 5 people, 2 pizzas. Everybody gets 2, 3 slices.
Yeah,
that sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, I remember I was putting together a workshop. God, when was this? 2007, 2008, and so lean startups were coming up. Lean from manufacturing applied to IT was also coming up. So don't build stuff that nobody wants in the first place. Lean startups, lean from the old school. Get rid of your garbage, reduce spend, make it more efficient, all that kind of stuff. And that was, most people had no idea what I was talking about for either one of those. So I was like, there's a better way to do things from the beginning, and also like the argument about there's a lot of people, probably more on the commercial side, but maybe not. Let's focus on the bottom line. Well, what about the top line? What about everything that's in between the bottom and the top line? Like, where does modernization fit in there? You got to spend money to save money, to a certain extent, but just think things through before jumping straight into like the scenario we already talked about. Lift and shift, and then all you did was just make everything much more expensive than you realized. Which maybe that's good, because then that'll shock you so much that it makes you rethink some fundamental issues.
Yeah, that whole thing about refactoring and shutting things
Mm,
off and rebuilding them in the cloud. I mean, we took the approach. We had a application rationalization playbook that we used
hmm.
to where we could figure out whether something needed to be turned off, whether it needed to be refactored, whether it needed to be lifted and shifted for now,
Yeah.
or what portions of it needed to be lifted and shifted for now, but
Yep.
realizing that longer term it's got to be redeveloped or sunsetted, one or the other. And so
Yep.
we were able to do that more holistic, because then you could take advantage of all of the cloud elasticity if you built it as a cloud native solution to
Right.
take advantage of all of the elasticity and cybersecurity tools associated with cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is great. I like that. So we've peeled apart some of the stuff that is not super fun to talk about, not really sexy, but if you don't have that foundation and really, I like that. Having a small team is a way to go, because that makes it much less likely, in my experience, that it's going to turn into just an ongoing series of meetings where you're just going from one meeting to the next and never actually get anything done, which is hugely frustrating. I can't stand that.
Neither can I.
All right, this is therapy time. So I think I think this will be a topic that you are definitely interested in. So looking at your career, um, I think we could argue that you've been involved in the future of work for quite a while. So you were involved in DHS's performance and learning management systems and the Homeland Security Information Network. How, if you were going to do all those things that you did at the time today, what would change with the advent of AI and anything else that is not just a look at this shiny thing and then tomorrow look at this other shiny thing?
Wow. That's a wow. What a reflective question. Um, I think his end was really about the consolidation of multiple portals
Okay.
to getting everybody on one common platform. And so we were consolidating multiple portals onto a common SharePoint platform for the state and locals to be able to, and DHS to collaborate around incidents and issues. So
Okay.
that's what that was about. And then PALMS, the Performance and Learning Management System, was around the learning management systems across the big nine DHS components, and that was trying to get everybody on. Again, it was another consolidation of getting everybody on the same platform.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the advent of I think the focus would have been a little different now, in this from the standpoint of the success of AI, the success of agentic AI, the success of RPA. All of it is foundationally built on data.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I think the richness of the consolidation could have been would have been there would have been a richer experience, let me say it that way,
Okay.
had just the focus not been on getting everybody on a single platform, but getting everybody's data richer.
Hmm. Okay.
And so coming up with a data strategy to identify common data elements across those platforms
Hmm.
and to standardize on that, to now influence better information sharing
Mm-hmm.
across those platforms, would have been probably something that I would have reimagined now
Hmm. Okay.
in this new era.
Yeah.
When you're doing consolidations and when you're doing technology consolidations, the ultimate goal, at least back then, was to get everybody on a common platform to get better economies of scale.
Yeah. Right.
and the streamlined training and learning and all of that. And it's not that information sharing was not important, but I don't think that was the driver, I guess is the best way to say that. I mean, his in the information sharing network, that was fundamentally what it was for, but it was for them to have a platform to exchange data,
Yep.
to exchange information. But let's take that a step further and say, well, what are the common data elements that are being shared, and how do we now throw AI on top of that, or RPA to kind of automate some of those processes?
Yeah.
And now with the advent of agentic AI, how do we create a bunch of agentic agents that can go off and do some of the things that could need to be done at a lower level?
Yep. Okay.
Case in point, I'll use the example of the learning management system, and I've had a vision for this for a while. I'm looking to see if this is going to ever come to pass. But if you had a holistic HR system where an agentic AI agent gets assigned to you on your day of employment, and that agent is with you throughout your entire employment career, and they say, Dan, you've been in this job for a year. I'm looking around the agency, and here are a list of opportunities that you might be interested in.
Yeah.
Would you like for me to update your resume and submit for you? Or,
Yeah.
hey, Dan, here's a list of trainings that we recommend that you take based on your last performance appraisal.
Sure.
Here's some areas, opportunities that were mentioned by your manager. Do you want me to register you for those classes?
Right. That's neat. That's a good idea. Yeah. So would you see, so as part of whether it's RPA or agentic AI or anything like that, would you see that as a way to, we used to call it federation, like federated search? Would you do it in that way, or, to just leave things in place and put a layer on top of it, or to use that as a way to embrace them and pull them in?
Another great question, man. I seem to always be a fan of trying to federate.
Yeah, it seems easier.
It's to get the seamless interaction. If because once you're federated, then the interactions become seamless.
Right. Yeah.
But when you're trying to always, you're trying to bring things in, you end up with a spaghetti mess, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, but if you're, financially, if part of the goal is to shut down old spend and consolidate on new spend, you don't want to both add new spend and still keep the old spend, right? So, this is why I'm a big fan of paying attention to user experience, customer experience, employee experience, whatever experience you want to call it. So what might be a great experience for them could also be ridiculously expensive and complicated to operate, right?
That's fair.
So that's, but I like that. That's intriguing. I haven't had those kinds of thoughts about using agents as like a growth mentor or something for employees. That's a neat idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We might have to circle back around on that at some point.
I've talked about it on several podcasts. It was a vision I had when I was CIO at OPM. I met with the HR people. I said, hey, what if a federal employee on the day, they have an agent that's tied to their unique identifier?
Yep.
It's their agent. That agent follows them throughout their federal career.
Yeah. That's neat. Yeah. Do you remember when you would have originally thought about that and discussed it?
Oh, last year.
Oh, okay.
This is as of last year. Yeah.
Okay.
No. I mean, as we were reimagining HR,
Okay.
my thought was really the same. Let's reimagine it. Let's reimagine HR in an AI agentic AI world. And
Okay.
in my opinion, what about an agent that gets assigned to you that answers all of your HR questions, that
Right.
looks over your portfolio, that's kind of a mentor and coach that can help you navigate federal work on day one.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's been trained on all the policies and everything that comes out. So,
Yeah.
there's change in administration. you train the model on the new policies of the administration,
Yep.
and from there forward, that agent begins to start to work with you on the changes.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. We might have to swing back on another episode and play with that a bit more, or just do it offline and
Sure.
report back to people. That's really interesting. All right. I like that. So in the interest of, I mean, we could, like, I tell people we could easily have very, very long conversations, but in the interest of time, I wanted to. So since you spent so much time at OPM, and we just talked about HR, so I've been slightly surprised. I don't know why, but there's still paperwork everywhere, and there turns out there's even more paperwork in HR mechanisms. So there's I don't know a lot about this, so I'm just gonna. It could be total nonsense. You can tell me that. So there are concepts in personnel systems like the Electronic Official Personnel Folder (EOPF), and I believe this is recent. The Federal Agency Digital Guidelines Initiative (FADGI), which is a standard on how to digitize records like paper records for HR purposes. Do you see what's the benefits or challenges around putting standards in place within an agency, let alone across agencies that you might be serving, so that as part of the modernization or transformation, or however you might pitch it, what's the role of those kinds of standards that might be driving down costs and making it easier to stand up new agencies or divisions?
I think the bigger challenge is cultural, and then I'll couch it this way: we've got what the federal government, in my opinion, is a unique animal because we've got just the range of stakeholders is crazy, from a 23-year-old to a 70-year-old.
Right. Yeah.
And so, when you're building solutions, that's your audience.
Yeah.
And so I always go back to, when did we stop issuing paper checks? Somebody made a decision that says, we're going to direct deposit and we're no longer going to be mailing you a check.
Right.
And America adjusted.
Yeah. Right.
We adjusted.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I get annoyed if somebody tries to give me a check. I'm like, oh, that means I got to go to the bank. Oh my God, can we just electronically just transfer it and call it a day? I don't want to have to get in a car, go in a bank, stand in a line, and sign a check and give it to them a check.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that is, so that's not a technology problem.
Yep.
It's a cultural problem. It's, when do we draw the line in the sand and say, hey, we're discontinuing this service effective this date. Going forward, everything is going to be digital. Mm-hmm. That's just a decision.
Right.
And I think that's where we just need to make the decision. We're no longer doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. Because it is no longer cost effective for government to do that, and move on.
Right.
And so having the standard is not the problem. Having the technology is not the problem. Mm-hmm. What needs to just happen is the decision. We're just not doing that anymore. The same way at OPM, the administration made a decision that I'm fully in support of, is we're not sending out booklets anymore to retirees. You'll get them electronically.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Why not? I mean, makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Another perfect example of all that required was a decision.
Yeah.
And so my 82-year-old mother, if she wanted to get that book, she'll set up an email account, and what she'll do is she'll call me. Hey, my tier one help desk
Yeah.
to download this book for me and print it out, and or show me how.
Yeah, right.
And then once I do that, then we're done.
Right.
The Social Security Administration, hey, we're no longer going to be mailing you your Social Security statements. Here's the process for you to go online. If you want to see that statement, you can download that statement.
Yep.
And so it's not a standards problem. I don't believe. I think we do need standardization, but if the tech is there, the problem is really just making the decision. That's it.
One thing I want to test out on you, for change management purposes, I've often found that it's more fun to work with people that are like you or I, who are we tend to adopt things fairly quickly, right? We're, right or wrong, we're going to probably be jumping in early. One of the things that I've seen a lot of enterprises do, especially, is ignore the people that are the naysayers and they complain about. It doesn't matter what you deliver; they're going to complain about it, and they get written off, which is not good. It's like leaving a cancer sitting there untouched. But if you talk to them and actually understand what their real reasons are behind there, you can find some things where you're like, oh, here's a boulder that nobody else is bothered with. If we solve that, then suddenly they're on board and everybody else was already on board.
Yes, and
okay.
And so,
those are quite the faces you were making there.
yes, and let me say it that way.
Okay.
I put a limit on how much of that I do. Let me say it that way.
Oh,
and so I try to spend zero of my time with people that are not interested in going where I want to go.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, and what I mean by that is I might meet with you to say, okay, tell me what your concern is.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can solve that concern, cool. If I've solved that concern and you're still not, okay, never mind, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to lose the momentum of the people. Dan says, Jesus, I really want to get some of Melvin's time, but he spends so much time with Bob that maybe this just isn't a good idea anymore. So Dan's no longer motivated by it anymore. And so now I've allowed Bob to tank the whole system because I was so worried about the naysayer, the person that didn't want to go.
Yeah.
You have to give voice to it.
Yeah, right.
But don't spend a whole lot of time on it.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. Yeah.
You've got to build momentum for the change. And then as you're building momentum and you come across that problem, you put it on your roadmap, you solve it, you go back to that person and say, hey, love to get you on board. Here's how we're addressing that. If they're still not going, I'm a firm believer, and everybody has heard me say this, I only go out with the girl that wants to go out with me. I don't waste my time with that.
There you go. Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, it's like, who was it? Ford, any color you want as long as it's black. Yes, but eventually he changed that policy, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's, normally I would ask you if we're going to give somebody advice on what they should do to create their next future today based on everything we talked about, what would that be? I mean, I think that's a pretty important one we just covered a moment ago. Is there anything else you wanted to add on to that or something else? Like if you're building your next future today, right now, so that tomorrow is different than just whatever happens, what would that be?
AI isn't going anywhere. It's not a new buzzword. It's not going anywhere. And so I would say, learn as much as you can, commit to being a lifelong learner so that you don't find yourself qualified for a job that no longer exists.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good way to round it out. I did say that, so AI could be artificial intelligence. It could also be accelerated ignorance. It could be accelerated irrelevance. So not paying any attention, super dangerous. But also don't turn your brain off and just assume AI is going to solve everything. So I think that's in line. Cool. Okay. Well, Melvin, thank you so much for joining me on this. I really enjoyed where we went on this. That's the rest of your life calling. Yeah, but I think we should one way or another we're gonna have to circle around. We'll probably do some things off camera, off air, but this definitely accomplished what I was looking. Even the things that I didn't anticipate at all worked out wonderfully well. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and hopefully between the two of us, we're helping to make a difference so that other people can benefit from it.
Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, Melvin.